Republicans demanding that Illinois State Police let it be known if they're enforcing a law that Republicans say a county court has declared unconstitutional, not just in the county, but for the entire state. While this thing is being appealed to the Illinois Supreme Court, what should happen here? Should the state police be enforcing Illinois' gun ban? And that's something that State Representative Dan Calkins, State Representative Patrick Windhorst, even joined by the Illinois State Rifle Association yesterday, they urged that Illinois State Police make it known if they're going to be enforcing the state's gun ban after a county judge has essentially declared that the gun ban is unconstitutional. Now, I want to, of course, bring up some of the highlights from yesterday's news conference with the Republicans, and in particular, State Representative Dan Calkins, Illinois State Rifle Association's Ed Sullivan, and Patrick Windhorst. And you're going to hear this in really kind of just little clips. And then we'll get to a question I asked in particular about an argument that's being made concerning the issue of whether or not the state can tell you what you are able to defend yourself with. So here is a little bit of the news conference with State Representative Dan Calkins leading. You'll have Illinois State Rifle Association's Ed Sullivan in there as well, plus Patrick Windhorst, a state representative from the metropolis area. Here you go. Here's them talking about how the ruling on Friday from Macon County is statewide.
Last Friday, Judge Forbes issued a final judgment, and I'm going to use a couple of words here that are legal, and lawyers are listening in, and people want to know what's going on. You can ask an attorney. It was a Rule 18 order, a final judgment declaring the law unconstitutional. And in order to make a direct appeal to the Illinois Supreme Court under this Rule 302A1, the Attorney General has to agree that the law has been invalidated and it negates the very existence of the law and in all applications. And that is the essence of this appeal.
The statement that we have released from ISRA is, after reviewing with counsel the Macon County Circuit Court's decision based on how the decision is not explicitly limited to one named person or groups of persons, and based on how the opinion clearly finds the challenge law unconstitutional on its facial basis as opposed to being unconstitutional as applied to any particular person or to all persons in the state. We acknowledge that the language therein also seems aimed towards facilitating an Illinois Supreme Court review, and we are confident that the skillful attorneys representing the plaintiffs will successfully present their arguments to that court at the appropriate time. Now, this was written a few days ago, and we learned this morning that the Supreme Court has taken up this decision on their May docket, and so we know that this has already taken place.
Now, despite these rulings, Governor Pritzker and Attorney General Raoul have pressed forward with their messaging that these rulings only apply to a limited number of people, even though the law has been deemed unconstitutional. What we have is a lack of clarity and confusion about what is going on with the status of the law. So the question I have, and I think the question that should be posed to those in the executive branch is the state actively enforcing this law? If they are actively enforcing this law, why are they enforcing a law that courts have deemed as unconstitutional? Even though there are only certain parties to these cases, the Attorney General was involved in the case, the Governor, of course, was involved in the case, and those decisions are binding upon them until a contrary ruling occurs. They should not be enforcing an unconstitutional law, and they need to express, if they are, why they are enforcing that law.
Governor Pritzker says it's ridiculous.
Again, that's State Representative Patrick Windhorst. Before that, Ed Sullivan from the Illinois State Rifle Association and State Representative Dan Calkins making their arguments that the law is unconstitutional and therefore should not be enforced, and they should answer as to if they are enforcing an unconstitutional law. Last night, while I'm laying in bed getting ready to go to bed, got a response from Illinois State Police. where they essentially said that ISP is not taking any actions inconsistent with the various court orders and cases. ISP will continue to follow guidance, they say, from the AG's office. So it didn't really explicitly say yes or no if they're enforcing it. They just said, again, I'll read it. ISP is not taking any action inconsistent with the various court orders and cases. Well, in the various court orders and cases, there have been 4 different cases in state court where they all have temporary restraining orders that were issued for thousands of people who are plaintiffs in those cases. And then you get Macon County's case that it's unconstitutional, that the gun ban is unconstitutional. So, what about that? Is that in accordance with how the Illinois State Police are enforcing the gun ban or not enforcing the gun ban? Or are they going to point to the Northern District of Illinois Naperville decision, which said that in the federal courts that the gun ban is constitutional, regardless of a pending case down in the Southern District? So which cases are they talking about and which decisions are they talking? So again, I got this late last night. Illinois State Police is not taking any enforcement actions inconsistent with the various court orders and cases. ISP will continue to follow guidance from the AG's office. So I instantly sent the Attorney General's office a question about what that guidance is. Is the Attorney General actually telling Illinois State Police to enforce this, or are they saying, it's pending appeal, so ratchet it back? Of course, we'll update you on that throughout, so stay tuned for that. Coming back, we got to take a break, but coming back, I want to share with you some of the Q&A from yesterday's news conference with State Representative Dan Calkins and Patrick Windhorst. And I asked a question about what seems to be the line of attack that the Attorney General's office is taking in defending the gun ban, and that's that long guns like AR-15s are not meant for self-defense. So stay tuned. We'll get to that coming up here on WMA. All right, talking about the gun ban challenge and some of the arguments that you're already seeing filed in federal courts and in some county cases as well, and Northern District of Illinois Federal Court, Southern District of Illinois Federal Court. But coming up, we're going to see the briefs that the state is going to file in defense of the gun ban in state court, with the Illinois Supreme Court set to hear the gun ban challenge in mid-May. So briefs are going to be filed back and forth, but we got a little bit of an indication, at least from the federal cases that are further along, as to what the arguments the state is using. Now, we know the arguments the plaintiffs are using. This violates the Second Amendment rights. In the state courts, they say that the carving out of police to not have to comply with this law violates equal protections because police don't have more constitutional rights than citizens have the constitutional rights. So that's the plaintiff's argument. But the defense, we've seen the Attorney General argue that, for instance, one of many arguments, long rifles like AR-15s are not for self-defense. I asked State Representative Patrick Windhorst, who's a former prosecutor, if there's a line in the sand as to what is able to be used for self-defense and what's not. And then you'll hear a question from another reporter following up on that.
Not for self-defense?
No, in fact, when we had some of the debate and questioning on the bill, we pointed to examples where rifles were used in self-defense. So the point of the Second Amendment is that we have the right to keep and bear arms to defend ourselves is one of those reasons. And whether the firearm is a handgun or a rifle, that's the purpose. There are people who would prefer to use a long gun in self-defense rather than a handgun. And that's why that's protected by the Second Amendment.
Can you use a grenade launcher?
Can you use a grenade launcher?
The courts have expressed that there are limits to the Second Amendment. And what the court expressed in the Heller case was that these need to be weapons that are in common use. So many of the weapons that have been banned under this law are owned by the hundreds of thousands in our state, perhaps even millions. So that, to me, is common use. The number of people owning a grenade launcher would not be, in my estimation, common use.
And you've got grenade launchers. They've got it spelled out on an AR-15 with a grenade launcher trigger device. I don't know how many people have those. And are those banned right now in state, at least according to the state law? But that's been challenged, and the county level court says that it's not. it's not constitutional. So we'll see what happens with this. But, some of the other questions that were asked yesterday at that news conference dealt with, how do you keep schools safe? There's been more mass shootings this year than there are days. Parents are worried about their kids' safety. You had State Representative John Cabello there to a former law enforcement officer urging that, well, if that's a concern, you need to increase the number of police in schools. But you don't see that effort at the State House. You actually see efforts to try to take police out of schools. So if there's a serious concern of violence at schools, of possible mass shootings, you need to increase the amount of police there. But others say, well, they see the answer is just getting all guns off the street. I don't know if that's feasible. We've got a Second Amendment right, and that would be a tall order. And then ultimately what you would be doing is, the argument is, you'd be disarming law-abiding citizens, and it would be the criminals who would still have those weapons. So this of course, we've been tracking this since January 10th when the governor enacted the assault weapons ban. We'll continue to track it all throughout, so stay with us here on WMAY. I'm Greg Bishop. Bishop on Air. Search that everywhere.
From the Fly SPI Studios, take the